Hello, you're watching Global Insight, where we speak to experts from around the world on issues making headlines. I'm Also Young. The debate over whether boy band BTS should or shouldn't fulfill their military duties as Korean citizens has stretched on for years now. Last week, their management HYBE announced all members will serve, beginning with the oldest member, Jin. But the issue has not gone away. Over the months, South Korea's law that allows award-winning sportspeople and cultural artists an exemption from serving regular military service has prompted a contentious debate over multiple issues regarding fairness. Should mainstream cultural artists also be included in the exemption category? And broadening the question further, should anyone be given special treatment at all? To discuss this issue, we have General Chun In-bum, retired Lieutenant General, who is commander of the South Korea's Special Forces. And also joining us today is Lee Hyun, Associate Dean and Professor of Law at Handong International Law School. Very warm welcome to you both. Thank you for joining us again. And well, my first question goes to you, General Chun. Now, the issue of giving special treatment to certain people who have won awards for sports or cultural arts, that's raised a lot of questions over fairness. First, the question of why only traditional and classical artists are being exempted from regular service, and then there's the question of whether anyone should be given special treatment at all. So how do you see this issue as someone who's really devoted their whole life to the army and national defense?
So first, I just would like to say that I very welcome the decision by BTS to enter military service. Having said that, there is no good reason why popular artists should not be given an exemption while traditional and classical exemption, and that is exactly the problem. As of now, it's not just classical and traditional artists that are getting exemptions. There are a dozen more categories that receive exemptions. Statistics by 2018 show that nearly 60,000 males are exempted because of these exemptions. Shortage of men to go into service. This is no longer a feasible thing for us to do. So having said that, I think we are now in a situation where we need to think from the very beginning the whole policy and regulations that we have been having for conducting alternate civilian service. In my opinion, only those for health reasons, whether it's physical or mental, should be exempt, with conscientious objectors, and probably the Merchant Marine Reserves, which is a category that is for the security of Korea. So I think those are the only three categories that require an exemption or special consideration regarding military service. Also, having said this, I believe that maybe for those athletics and people who have talents that are physical or periods that are important to them, maybe entrance into the military could be extended from age 29, which is right now, maybe the 30s, to give them an opportunity to fulfill their physical and artistic goals.
Well, it certainly seems that as of now, the law does seem a bit outdated. There are some holes in it as well. But Professor Lee, now, it seems very difficult for the government and lawmakers too at the moment to make a decision on how to revise the law, given the sheer sensitivity around this issue. What do you think will be the biggest factors that they'll have to consider when they do revise the law on exempting artists, or deciding whether to scrap the whole exemption completely?
No, I think what General Jun was saying, I think, resonates with me in terms of how the law is applied. And so because you have these exemptions right now for traditional artists who practice traditional music in Korea, as well as sports figures who have won awards at various national competitions. The question really here is, since those people now have exemptions, it is natural to consider whether or not a group like BTS even though they're not involved in traditional or classical music, why shouldn't they also get an exemption? So really, in part, the question is, this idea of balancing between, these kinds of groups. And really, you can make the argument there's no difference between a classical music artist versus a pop artist. But really, in terms of the questions of the law, the real issue here is objectivity. You need an objective standard. If you're going to apply an exemption of this kind, what is the objective standard by which then these groups will get exemptions? So under the current regulations, a sports athlete or a traditional, let's say a classical music artist, if they won some major award on international competition, so for sports figures, if you get at least a bronze medal, right, at the Olympic Games, or if you are a classical musician, if you won some international music competition, those are seen as the objective standard by which you can get exemption. But for a pop artist, you have all of these awards, but they're not international awards per se. They are, like, for example, in the United States, the Grammy Awards, or you have the MTV Music Awards, right? And so if you're going to apply a standard, do you use a national US standard? What about European Music Awards, or a local Australian Music Award? So it really is a very difficult question when it comes to applying a standard, because the law needs some objective way of determining who gets the exemption for the purposes of fairness.
Professor Lee, there have been many public polls on this, and they do seem to differ in some ways. But what was quite interesting recently was an opinion poll by Newsys, and according to that poll, young people are more inclined to, oppose BTS or K-pop artists from being exempt from the army. So, why do you think this is? I mean, why do you think they're being perhaps a bit more, more conservative than the older generations, than you would think?
Well, I think very naturally, the younger generation, they're the ones who have to serve, especially the young men who have to serve. And so they see BTS in a similar situation, and they say, well, if they are not serving in the military, then, why should I? And so I think this question of fairness comes out, of course, and equality. And, under the Constitution, Article 11 provides that, all citizens are equal before the law. And the sense here is that if you, exempt or sort of highlight one group because they are famous, then I think a lot of people will feel very disenchanted by that, because they see that the government is not applying the rules fairly or equally among their peers. And so in Korea, of course, we've had this very important issue in military service with respect to certain people getting exemptions. For example, there's the perception, at least among some, that rich people get better advantages, or someone who's politically powerful, their children get certain benefits when it comes to military service. And so I think across the board, for those who are young, and particularly those who are going to be subjected to military service, they see this as an equality issue. And so this is a very big issue, of course, because we live in a democracy, that the law should be applied equally to all. And so I don't see any reason why the young people wouldn't feel this way, because this is a part of our society today. So it is, I think, very natural and a very natural outgrowth of the democracy that we live in today's Korea.
There's, of course, the issue of fairness, but some lawmakers have raised the sheer economic value that BTS brings, and also how they contribute to South Korea's national prestige. And General Chun, the Ministry of Culture, they've proposed two ways, according to a local broadcaster, SBS. They've submitted this plan to the presidential office, apparently, and they have proposed either doing away with the law on exempting cultural artists and sports people completely, but creating ways to allow BTS members to keep on performing and rehearsing during their service. Or option two would be adding provisions to the current law to include mainstream musicians to those who can receive special treatment. So how feasible do you think either of these suggestions are?
They sound pretty good, but it would be, those are very bad ideas. Number one, if you start doing that, it will affect the mission of a unit that these members are a part of. That means that the the mission of that unit, which is to defend the Republic of Korea, will be affected. If you're going to do that, it's rather better not to have BTS come into the military in the first place. I do not believe that that is the intent of the BTS members. So once they're in the military, they should be focused on doing their mission, which is defending this country with whatever jobs that they're allocated with. Maybe an idea would be that all of the members would go into the military at the same time so that they could finish at the same time as well. But other than that, I don't see doing either of those options as good options. What is more disturbing to me is that the Ministry of National Defense kind of implied that they would be privy to this kind of idea. This is very dangerous. Once you're in the military, you must focus on the mission and the mission only, and that should be the priority.
Right, there shouldn't be a mixture of the two, really. And well, Professor Lee, so your thoughts on the Ministry of Culture's proposal? I mean, which do you think looks more likely at this point if lawmakers decide to give either of these two options the green light?
Right. Since as the General Jun said, they declared about a week ago, right, through their management agency, that they're going to serve and fulfill their military obligation. I think it's partly a moot point in terms of whether or not to exempt them. But with respect to, the overall question about, whether they should serve at all, naturally, I'm sort of just of the opinion, of course, like General Jun, that they should serve. And I think this is borne out by just the practical reality in Korea of course, national security, but also, the falling birth rate in this country. And right now, as we all know, Korea is facing a dramatic, steep decline in the overall population. So that basically, statistics say that the number of 20-year-old males in Korea, which totaled about 330,000 people in 2020, is expected to fall to 226,000 and then 143,000 in 2040. So if this pattern is going to continue, as General Jun mentioned earlier in the interview, that basically you may have to revise the whole exemption system, that you would do away with some of these other exemptions because of the practical reality of service in the military. So, I think General Jun, of course, is the expert in terms of what it takes in terms of service with respect to the whether or not they will be able to serve and then also perform at the same time. But just overall, I think that with respect to this debate about whether or not they should serve or not, I think it's a moot point given that they have declared their intention to serve.
Well, when it comes to BTS's fan members, of course, many have expressed their support for their decision to go to the army and have declared that they will wait until 2025 for them. But, well, General Jun, now with BTS members being enlisted, hopefully these so-called army fans will turn into actual supporters of the Korean army. So what kind of support do you hope to see to really improve the welfare of all those who serve in the army?
There's 1,000 things probably that we would need, but I would just focus on respect of the individual person who serves his or her nation. I think that is where that we must start. Respect of the individual, respect for the service of these people. We must remember that a soldier serves and is on alert 24 hours, 7 days a week, and that they risk their lives doing so. And it's not just about paying them 2 million won a month. It's more of the respect part. I hope, and I'm not joking, that the fans of BTS, the BTS army, who are, what I understand are largely women, I hope they will start a petition where that the women of Korea will start that they now want to serve in the military or other forms of public service, because we are at a critical point where we need to look at not only alternate civilian service, but for women to serve in the military as well. So I think this is a good place where we need to start thinking about all of these things and I'm grateful for BTS for bringing up this issue.
Well, this is where we'll have to wrap up the discussion today, I'm afraid. But that was General Chun In-bum and Professor Lee Hyun. Thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.